All right, then we are ready to get rolling with one of um, the sessions that I'm most excited about. This is going to be a panel discussion on how markets nationwide are adapting to these new COVID-19 challenges. So we have some of my very favorite people in the farmers market world coming to talk to us and present all of the amazing information and tactics they've been using. So I'm just going to introduce everyone now, and then we will turn it over to our panel host, Ben Feldman, with the National Farmers Market Coalition. We also have Kathy Zeman, the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. Kathy was actually our keynote speaker at our very first conference back in 2017. And she's just become a tremendous friend and advisor to our association, as has Colleen Donovan, who is the director of the Washington State Farmers Market Association. And we also have Catt White with Intense, who we've gotten to spend an awesome morning with already. So how this will work. Ben is going to have each of our awesome state leaders present some information, tips, tactics that they're using. And as we go along, you can type questions into the chat box, and Liz will be compiling them. And after each market association presents, Ben will have those questions, and we can get through as many as we have time for. So, um, Ben Feldman, Farmers Market Coalition.
Thanks, Robbie. Appreciate you having me on. Sad we're not in Alaska. Well, sad I'm not in Alaska, I guess, since most of you all are, but I'm happy to be with you today. What we're experiencing is really, this is a worldwide moment, right? This pandemic is a worldwide pandemic. And I think it's important that we sort of recognize that this impacts everybody in different ways. It's both a worldwide experience, so it's shared, but it's also very personal. Everybody is experiencing it very differently, and the impacts in different parts of the world and different parts of the country are quite different. So, as we discuss this, I think it's worth keeping in mind also that people are some people are losing their lives, they're losing their livelihood, and this type of situation can be a challenging one to talk about. I want to also mention that crises like this can really help define what's important and what's vital to the work that we're doing, right? At these moments, sometimes it helps clarify where we need to put our time and energy when we have very little time and energy to be able to focus on so many different things. And certainly from our perspective, one of those things that is vital, that is essential, is getting food to people. And the work that all of you all do every day is at the heart of that, right? Farmers market managers facilitate that connection between farmers and shoppers. And so that leads into one of the things that's for the Farmers Market Coalition so important for us is that farmers markets, especially in this trying time, are essential services. We believe that they are essential services, and we have been continuing to ask the federal government for that clarification. Talk a little bit more about that. We also have a responsibility, a shared responsibility. Obviously, the impact to society and to individuals is not insignificant. And so that's part of what we're here to talk about in this particular session is how markets can play that role of continuing to ensure that people have access to food and farmers continue to have access to their livelihood while also ensuring that we're doing our part in order to minimize the spread of the virus. So from our perspective, while farmers markets are essential services, it's also important to keep in mind, again, we have that part to do, and that markets that can't or will not implement social distancing policies to prevent the spread of the virus probably should not be open right now. That said, markets around the country are doing incredible work in order to redesign these markets, redesign the way they do business on a very fast timetable as it's a changing landscape in every moment. So the work that market managers are doing right now in order to continue this is Herculean. And in places where markets are open, markets are thriving. People still want local food. They want to buy from the farmer in many cases now more than ever. The idea of the values that come with farmers markets have not gone away. And in fact, we are seeing the strong support for farmers who sell directly to the public when those opportunities are available to people. I do want to mention just a couple things that FMC is continuing to fight for on behalf of farmers market operators, a couple resources that we have, and then I do want to turn it over to our panelists to talk about examples of what's happening in their communities and what market managers are doing in order to rethink how they run their operations. First, as I mentioned, we continue to push for farmers markets to be considered essential services, especially at the federal level, working with states to share information in order to make sure that to the extent possible, states are taking that action. But of course, if we could get that declaration at the federal level, that would be outstanding. USDA, CDC continue to duck the question and refer folks back to local agencies. Obviously, that does not provide us with the clarity that we need. Also, the most recent relief package that passed included support for farmers who sell direct to the public. That is wonderful news, and it's the first time that farmers who are involved in direct-to-consumer activities are explicitly included in anything like this. So it's a historic moment, and congratulations and good luck. It's tremendous. Farmers market operators appear to be eligible for many of the small business agency support coming out of the federal government. Those are loans and grants, of which some can be forgiven. So that's a potential to help keep markets in operation as they take on the cost of reconfiguring, as well as many markets are experiencing declines in vendor attendance. So there are opportunities. There's not a lot of clarity on those things yet, how farmers will receive those payments or what the forgiveness on the loans looks like. So a lot to be learned there. We've been successful in asking USDA Agricultural Marketing Service to extend the deadline for the local food and farmers market promotion program grants. Those now are due May 26th, which we greatly appreciate. They did not push them back further because they want to still be able to get the funds out on the original timetable. So we appreciate both considerations that they've made. We do continue to push for waivers for the matching requirements. That is not something that the administration of AMS can do or USDA can do on their own, and will require Congress to make that move. And then I just briefly want to point out a couple different resources. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can share my screen for everybody. Farmers Market Coalition, we've been doing regular updates with information about what's happening, largely responses from state and local or state, local, federal agencies, as well as relief opportunities. And then we have also another post here, which is examples of best practices, resources, and what markets around the country are doing, including some great photos and links highlighting what markets are doing, those Herculean efforts I mentioned that markets are engaged in order to make sure that their markets can continue to operate in a safe manner. And then the last thing I want to mention before I hand it off to the first of our wonderful panelists is that we are hosting a webinar on Monday about the physical redesign of markets. We have unfortunately already reached our capacity for that. We have 500 people registered. So we're very pleased to see the level of response. And for folks who weren't already able to register for Monday's webinar, we will be recording it and we'll send it out to folks. And with that, I'd love to turn it over. I think we'll go ahead and start with Kathy. Kathy, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Ben. And I think that I'm going to share screen, right? So I can get to my slides. All right. Hey folks, Kathy Zeman from Minnesota. I'm glad I'm not in Alaska. I'm ready for spring. So although I realize now we're getting snow today, so that's no fun. We were actually, garlic is up and rhubarb is up, and now we're back. Apparently we're back into winter. Right, Joe. Okay, folks, I'm not going to be happy if that doesn't show up.
What do you need, Kathy? Do you see the screen share?
I did, and I clicked that. Hang on.
PowerPoint open?
It is, and I clicked from slideshow from the beginning. Let me go here. What do you see on your side?
Nothing yet.
All right, that helps. All right, let me go back here. Escape. Go. All right, share, and I click share. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. Let's go back to here. And from beginning. Come on, go. What do you see on your side?
Says you've started your screen sharing, but no slides yet.
No, and then I clicked on, oh, okay, hang on a second. Do you see a screen that says guidance for farmers markets and vendors?
Not yet.
Okay. How about I emailed it to you? Do you want to pull it up on your end?
Sure. Yep. Let me pull
Let's do that. It's their short slides. It'll work.
Yep. No worries.
Can you tell I've now done a million of these Zooms, and it's like we just make it work no matter what you do. You just make it work.
Oh, it looks like there's a screen that's about to be shared.
It's trying hard.
So it looks like you clicked the whiteboard. So if you unshare and then share again.
Oh, here, I'll do stop share.
Stop share.
Yep.
And then hit share again.
Okay.
And then make sure you click on the actual little window that has your PowerPoint in it.
Yeah. Okay, share screen. Oh, my only option is whiteboard.
Oh, well, I'll just pull up your slides.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. All right. I'm assuming you can all hear me, correct?
We can hear and see you great.
All right, so I'll wait till you all get the slides up there. Somebody asked me, you know, how to get prepared for this COVID-19 pandemic. And I said, the time to get prepared for this was 10 years ago, right? That's when we need to get, so you're gonna say, oh, we're not in a good position. That's okay, start now, because we're gonna have another one in 5 years or 10 years. There will always be something coming up. So now's the time to get your relationships built with the people that you need to have relationships with so that you can influence policy. You can go to the next slide. So on March 16th in Minnesota, I texted our commissioner, Tom Peterson. He's our commissioner of agriculture. And I said, Tom, it doesn't explicitly say farmers market. It says markets in Governor Walz's executive order. And so literally Tom texts the attorneys in the governor's office. And by 7:30 that night, we had that loophole closed so that farmers markets, and that couldn't have happened if we wouldn't have had this relationship, right, with our Commissioner of Agriculture for the last several, 5-10 years. So now's the time to, figure out who your people are and, and make sure that you've got those good relationships. So Farmers markets in Minnesota were exempt from closing as long as we don't offer on-site food consumption, including food samples. And then we're encouraged to do drive-throughs, our 6 feet of social distancing, and promoting hand washing. And you can go forward. So in Minnesota, that means that even ready-to-eat vendors and our food trucks, they are okay still selling at our farmers markets. They just have to take pre-orders and bring it as takeout, right? So all of our vendors. The 6 feet of social distancing, nobody knows what 6 feet looks like except that lady wearing Prince's Purple Rain hoop skirt, right? That is what I say we should all Velcro that around our waists and put people through the market, because that, right, I'm serious. It's a great, and it's Purple Rain, Minnesota, Prince. Okay, moving on. And then doing drive-throughs, correct? And then promoting hand washing. So there, and we just did our big webinar here. We had 211 people jump on just from Minnesota, right, to figure it out. You can go to the next slide. In Minnesota, we're going to stress that our solutions, we need short-term solutions, and we're going to need long-term solutions, right? And I don't want us to spend a lot of resources and time and money on short-term solutions unless it's just to survive. But I really want everybody to look at long-term solutions, and it has to be financially sustainable. So you're right. In the middle of a crisis, we can throw 100 million volunteer hours at something. But this crisis, I don't think is going to be done in 2020. I think it's going to creep into 2021. And then we don't have 1 million volunteer hours every week, at least not in Minnesota Farmers Market. So we're looking at it. It needs to be financially sustainable, and it's got to be personnel sustainable. So what our Rochester market did with 255 volunteer hours to get their market to go last weekend, that's not feasible in most of our markets in Minnesota. We just don't have that many people. So that's what we're going to push for, is sustainability on both financial and personnel. You can go to the next slide. So in Minnesota, I mean, in anywhere, there are free pre-order options. So again, remember our governor said farmers markets can do what you need to do, but try to do that pre-order thing so you get people to move through. So like in 2020, we can't be Minnesotan. We cannot hug each other and shake hands and talk about the weather. You're going to buy your groceries at your farmers markets and move on out. So pre-orders, we have a lot of Amish and folks that do not have internet access. So we know that we can do pre-orders with phone calls, emails, Google Forms, Square, all those are free. There's a free app called Calendly that if you want to use that to schedule a drive-through, that's all free. And then there's a whole bunch that you can pay a lot of money for. We're using one of them. It is not without issues, however. So and maybe they all have issues. That's the one thing I want somebody to do, right? Is figure out which of these platforms is the least issue-ish. Okay, next one. All right, so today we're going to show you 3 quick slides on each of these farmers markets. St. Paul Farmers Market, the Mill City Farmers Market, and Rochester. And they go from the least complex to the most complex. So next slide. St. Paul Farmers Market is 4 years older than the state of Minnesota. So that is an old farmers market. And go ahead, next slide. And so David has 24 different locations all over the city of St. Paul and all the little suburbs. And he's the one that came up with, okay, if we throw a table in front of everybody's vendor, see, look, he's just got an empty table in front of everybody's vendor display. Now you created 5 feet of space between that vendor and all of the customers. And that became then easier to put that idea in people's heads to sit, to stand 6 feet away. Next slide. And literally that's what he sent out to his people. Now the only thing wrong with his little hand scratching there is that I think his little smiley customers are closer than 6 feet, right? But other than that, that's a pretty decent little diagram. And so everything at the markets, all tablecloths went away. Everything is a washable table, sanitizable table, and that we created that distance of 6 feet between the vendor and the customers. So next time. The next bit of complexity is the Mill City Farmers Market. Next slide. Mill City Farmers Market is in Minneapolis. They started in 2006. Look at this one. They average 4,000 to 5,000 customers on every Saturday. And they have up to 60 vendors. Martha Archer is a brilliant, she's the executive director, and she's brilliant, and they do not yet have a good solution to keep 5,000 customers 6 feet away in the summer. Next slide. But what she did do for the short run is they said, okay, vendors, they handpicked the 11 vendors that already had an online presence, already had some kind of an online store. And then they made all their customers order to their vendors. And then next slide. And then she used this app, the Calendly app, and all of the customers, so you'd place an order with Kathy, Rachel, and Ben and Robbie, whatever we had. And then you got to this little app and you said, yep, I can be there at 9 o'clock. I'll be there between 9 and 9:15. So that's how she controlled her people. And she thinks she can get really close to, with this system, really close to her 60 vendors back in the rotation. Still not sure how we're going to handle 4,000 to 5,000 customers though, right, in Minneapolis. Okay, so that's one of them. That's another model. Go ahead. Our last model in Minnesota is the Rochester Farmers Market. We happen to have, we've got a grant to see is it okay, can farmers markets really be food hubs? And in my head, I wanted this to work because I wanted a farmers market to be able to make money, not just raise money with sponsorships. I wanted to say, no, we'll charge enough that we can make money. Okay, that hasn't really played out really well, but at least we can prove how you shouldn't do it. So, fail fast, fail forward. Yes, that's what we're doing. So nobody else has to repeat all of our mistakes. So I'm not quite sure this is a legit one, but go ahead. So this market already was a licensed food hub in Minnesota. The licensing part is easy. It's $57. $57 buys us the wholesale license. The requirements of the license is not hard. What is really hard to make this work is the woman power, the manpower, the hours. Whoa, that is a killer. So you can go to the next slide. So the reason that this could happen is because they already had an online system, local line, which we've had issues with. So that's not a perfect one yet. But this is how they set it up. The little blue box, that's their indoor market. And then this is how they set up their outdoor market. Their first Saturday, they had $5,400 in sales. And then this next Saturday, they've already got $11,000 in sales. In that first Saturday, it took them 255 hours between paid staff. And so that's not sustainable, right, in the long run. You can go to the next slide. And that's how they had to do it. All the orders come in, and they had they have a sponsor, they have many sponsors for their market, and that sponsor donated the blue bags. And so as orders came in, they packaged them all up that didn't need either refrigeration or freezer. So there were really 3 different pockets, right? You had refrigerator orders in a trailer that was a cooler. You had your freezer over here, and then this. And in Minnesota, where we get caught on this one, we can't, our cottage food law, you can't, it's not easy to run it through this online system. And SNAP, you can order both of them online, but you can't take payment online. It has to be in person. So this is not yet a perfect system, and it's pretty top heavy right now as far as labor. So that's what we trialed in Minnesota, and we do not have all the answers yet. I just think you can go to the next slide then. So this is what we decided to do, and it wasn't my idea. I don't think I've ever had a really good original idea, except maybe the hoop skirt. I think that was my idea, but I am willing to steal good ideas all I can. And so I think this idea came from Pennsylvania. They're doing this free, weekly Zoom. I'm like, oh yeah, we could do that. So every Thursday at 1 o'clock, we are going to do these free Zoom meetings, and then anybody can join on. And so we had our first one on yesterday, and we had 68 people join on. And so we had state agencies on, farmers markets, vendors, the university people. And so I think as collectively, we will be able to figure out some answers and probably a lot more questions. So there you go. I think that was my last slide. So I can hand this off now to, stay safe, everyone. Be well and keep in touch as we try to survive this. All right, that's it from Minnesota.
Ben, who are we going to next?
Colleen, why don't we head to Washington State, and we'll wrap with Catt.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we
Yeah?
can.
Okay, good. Okay. I didn't get the tech tip about this, but I like it a lot, as long as it's not jazz hands. Anyway, thank you so much for having me here today. This is great. I'm Colleen Donovan, the Executive Director of the Washington State Farmers Market Association, and really, really glad to be with everybody. Again, I wish I could be there with you in Anchorage, but we're going to hopefully have a rain check one of these days. And so just to cover what's happened in Washington State, as you probably remember, Washington State was one of the first states with an outbreak of the coronavirus. So we had that horrible incident at the nursing home in Kirkland, Washington, which is in the Seattle area. And that really kind of centered us as one of the early hotspots. So I was looking back, and I found my first email on March 1st saying, hey, should we start talking about this virus thing in the markets? And fortunately, it was a week after we had our annual conference, so we're very, very grateful we were able to meet in person, but we just barely missed it. So we're really glad that Alaska is making this work. And so then on February 29th, the governor announced the state of emergency, and that was on February 29th, and that's when we had our first death in the state. So we were a little ahead in that regard. And fortunately, one of the things in Washington State is that there were very few farmers markets open at that time. We have very few year-round markets. We're not like California at all. And so of our members, there might be maybe eight that are year-round, and then there's a smattering of winter markets. And so that was really fortuitous in some ways. And then so markets are starting to wonder what to do and how to figure this out. And the big news came on March 13th, Friday, March 13th, when the mayor of Seattle suspended the markets in Seattle. And so of our year-round markets, 4 of them are in Seattle. And she suspended them through April 13th, which is a massive hole in our marketing system, and that, you know, there's hundreds of farmers that depend on those markets, particularly this time of year, where that cash is really crucial in terms of bridging over into the growing season in the main market season. So, and estimates are around that those 4 markets for that period of time represent maybe over $1.5 million in sales. So it's a really big deal for Washington State. We also had pop-up markets going on and a couple of smaller rural year-round markets, but it was a really big deal. And the markets had been taking precautions and taking the cue from the governor and the CDC and so on. But one of the major problems is that these markets are permitted as temporary events. And that has been a thorn in the side of farmers markets for a very long time. But this really brought this issue to the fore because the farmers markets were last in line to be considered as proper business, as part of the business community. And so that has been a real issue in terms of fighting to keep the markets open. Fortunately, our governor has allowed farmers markets to operate, equating them to being like grocery stores as in other states. And we were lucky. We didn't have to text the head of the Department of Ag, but we had some partners that we've been working with who are, you know, again, to Kathy's point, really working to make sure that farmers markets were included as essential services. We're in the essential workforce for food and agriculture as of right now. And our governor just extended our stay home, stay safe until May 4th. But we technically are still at the statewide level considered essential services. The challenge has been at the local jurisdictions. And the challenge has been giving them the confidence they need that we're operating safely. And public health has been a really tremendous ally and support in having those conversations, but the markets really need to convince the local jurisdictions that they can operate safely. And so right now, our key messaging is that markets are not going to be business as usual. That we want to operate safely for the protection of shoppers, vendors, and the market staff. That public safety is number one. It's going to be a very different market, and that seems to be the message that has the most impact, far more than the benefit of farms, businesses, getting food into communities. Really, that public safety seems to be what people are listening to. And part of the challenge with the farm businesses is that every business is hurting right now. But I really like Catt's point in a previous session about if, we need them to be able to plant so that we have food tomorrow. And a lot of our advocates around agriculture get that and want that. But we have to have the markets open, give people confidence, so that we can have anybody operating at all, and then hopefully over time build things back. I feel like we've been in a bit of a sprint, and then I thought we were going into the marathon mode, but then some new hills came up, and now I hear from Kathy that the short term is 6 to 9 months, and I was hoping that was the long term. So I think that's a really good point. We have a long haul here. So where we are now is that a lot of our main market season is going to be opening in May and June. That's when the vast majority of our member markets open. And so of the markets that are scheduled to open in April, about half are delayed, a couple are closed, and some are open under different restrictions. And so again, like others and like you, we're really working hard to help markets to operate safely. Those operational plans, the communication plans, the Farmers Market Coalition webinar on Monday will be terrific. All the questions around the market displays, what we're learning from Minnesota, all of that is really crucial to working together so that everybody can operate safely, build confidence, and keep the businesses afloat. I just wanted to add a couple more details from the Seattle experience, which has been so prevalent. And again, it's the press. There's been a bit of press and advocacy around that, including a sign-on letter with 1,500 signatures to the mayor to help to get the markets open. But it's really important to include why markets are essential. And interestingly, in the talking with reporters and so on, in some cases, there's a argument to be made that farmers markets really are, I don't want to say that, they're almost punished for being a community event. And it's held against them that people have fun and see their neighbors. And so having to strip away all of the good community assets and say, look, at its core are these businesses that depend on these sales, are growing for this community, and these people are also likewise dependent on these farmers. But because of the success of farmers markets and the proliferation of the community spirit and the events and all of the great education, some of that has been lost in people's minds of what a farmer's market is. So this is a real opportunity to bring back and foreground that important core business is, I think. Anyway, we could talk about in the question and answer, but there's loads of communication strategies that are going on. We've had a lot of collaboration across the state. You kind of have to pick and choose which webinars you jump onto and jump off of, but we're really grateful for all the ones that the farmers markets have been operating or offering, and look forward to sharing what we're doing too. I think I'll stop there, and I know that we'll also hear from Catt and the questions and answers as well. And then I could also, I guess one last point is that as an association, I think it's really important that we protect that farmers market lane. There's been an enormous interest in all kinds of different market channels, and I'm happy, and we want farmers to survive and reach their shoppers. But that farmers market lane needs to be protected for the sake of the organizations, for the sector, for what kind of habits shoppers have, and also foregrounding what a social asset those organizations are to the vendor community and to the communities they serve. So I think it is an opportunity to get our heads around that and communicate around that a bit more too. So with that, I'll hand it off, but look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Colleen. That's a really wonderful point, right? This particular version of our, to Kathy's point, there's something else coming down the road. We have to be adaptable, and what this particular version of it is not necessarily exactly what the next version of it looks like. So the more we can be resilient with our communities and serve in that role, the better. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Catt, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for question and answer.
Ta-da. So I think some of you who have been here all morning have been listening to me talk about this all morning, but I'll jump back, and a lot of mine sort of echoes what Colleen and Kathy have said. One of the biggest sort of mind-blowing things for me is that we're working so hard to do exactly the opposite of everything we've always done. So we're conscientiously taking down photos that show big crowds at farmers markets, whereas before our main goal was to make sure the angle of our photo never showed an empty street. Now we're desperately looking for photos that show empty streets. We're not promoting our markets very heavily. When somebody says, oh, I want to do an article and say that you're open tomorrow, I say, please don't. Please wait until next week. If I get too many people tomorrow, they will definitely close us again. So we're doing all these things that are kind of opposite of what we usually do. What's striking me a lot is what Colleen was just talking about, which is that my message always to consumers and to people in the farmers market industry is that it's really important that we let consumers buy directly from farmers, because then farmers keep the whole retail price. Well, that's not what happens in a delivery situation. We have some awesome market box kind of programs setting up and popping up in San Diego and different things, but they can't run for free. Neither can we, to Kathy's point, and we're all trying to figure that out. But on a long-term basis, those delivery services can't run for free. They're charging the farmers to do that, just like a distributor of any other kind would charge farmers to sell their produce. And what the special difference is farmers markets is that farmers develop relationships with customers, difficult to do if you're putting a drive-through box in somebody's trunk with no human contact or as little as possible, that farmers are keeping all of the retail income. Impossible to do if what they're doing is handing it off to a delivery service, which is just one more kind of distributor who's going to have a big percentage of the price and or charge a fee for delivering. So I don't know yet. And of course, I've been in kind of all day, everyday crisis mode for 3.5 weeks with our markets. So I don't think I've had as much time to analyze maybe as I should have. And maybe Ben's right that this is just sort of a stopgap and we will figure out a longer term solution to maintaining our core value and our core message. I don't think what we're doing right now is actually a term answer by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm going to talk about one other thing just because Kathy and Colleen hit a lot of things that I've mentioned a little bit this morning and that I'm ruminating on and thinking about talking about. But the one thing that we haven't discussed is the big moral dilemma for us personally about keeping markets open and the big division of customers out there. And I haven't gotten a lot of push from farmers, but from some grocery people. And what we've done is constantly survey our farmers and our vendors saying, if we can again, do you want to come out or are you feeling more comfortable sheltering for the next 30 days? Do you want us to start as soon as possible? Do you want us to start in 2 weeks? Do you want us to start in May? Do you want us to start in September? When are you going to feel comfortable coming back? Staff members that we laid off, most of them, we brought some back for tomorrow's market, but some of them don't feel comfortable coming back. They've got young children in their house. They've got a family member that has medical frailty issues, and they don't feel comfortable being in the public. Honestly, I'm not sure I feel comfortable being in the public tomorrow. I don't feel like I've got much choice, honestly. I've pushed so hard, the market's open, and now I'm wondering, is this a really good idea for a 63-year-old woman to be out there in the face of an enormous virus. And I'm going to be there, but I totally understand why some farmers and vendors and employees don't want to be there. And then when I don't know if y'all are managing your social media or if you're open at markets now, or if you've been closed and then you're opening again, but we have been closed and then open for a second and then closed again, closed by a different agency and then opened by one agency and closed by another. Some of you are familiar with our whole roller coaster. We're on tomorrow, but we're on under a bizarrely restrictive set of guidelines to the point where the police department and the mayor's office got to look at our vendor list and decide who truly offered perishable products. It's a level of scrutiny that makes no sense. It's very difficult to figure out what the motivation is. Somebody in the process really hates flowers, apparently. We're not allowed to have flower farmers there, even though we have more flower farmers in San Diego County than anybody in the whole country. And their stuff is perishable and it's dying. And some of it's edible, but also it's really good for your mental health. It would be a good idea to have them there. And we're not allowed to have them at our market tomorrow. So the shift in that, and each time you agree that they can have that much regulation over you, what happens is scary. But what's happened now is we've gotten approval, and this always happens on fairly short notice. At least this time we got almost 48 hours. The first time we had 12 hours to go from not having a market to having a market with a lot of restrictions in place. So how do you get those signs printed? How do you get that extra staff out there? We're open tomorrow and posting about that, but at a limited level so that we don't get too many people there, again, contrary to our usual patterns. Last night, especially, we just had a firestorm of people. I'm sure they're based in fear. I'm sure some of them are just bizarre kind of trolls and maybe were liquored up late last night, but we had a lot of really hateful feedback on social media. Managing that and staying calm and not internalizing it in the process is really tough. And it's something we're all gonna have to work on. We've developed a good structure for totally staying on message, no matter what comment is made about part of just don't we understand, or if somebody dies, it's on your hands, or the really kind of rough stuff coming back and forth on social media. We always just respond. We think it's safer to shop than at a grocery store. We think one-touch shopping is not as likely to expose you to a virus. We think being in the open air with our new structure, and granted, people are looking at pictures of us with wall-to-wall people like we usually try to achieve at our markets. Our new structure means our booths are 15 feet apart and we've got 20-foot aisles, and you're definitely in a better spot to be farther away from people than you would be at a grocery store. And we just have to keep repeating those positive things, but it's tough not to engage really personal, really kind of brutal comments from people who are fearful about this situation. So I think all of that strategy, working with your team to be able to answer those questions. I don't know what our team is going to face tomorrow on the street based on what we're getting on social media. Granted, most people are way more comfortable being really hostile and mean on social media than in person. So we're crossing our fingers that tomorrow will go smoothly. I'm sure we'll have some people out there that are rough. We did ago when we were open for one market. So I think the idea of developing within your plan and in your own head how you're going to deal with that, understand that it's part of the process as we're fighting to stay open or get reopened in the case of some markets. And as far as being up for this 6 or 9 months with no visible way to make any money at it or pay a staff, it's a scary thing. That's all I've got.
Yeah, Catt, well, thank you for bringing those things up. I mean, the reality of it is that market managers are, our food system workers, and they're all on the front lines of this, and it plays itself out in some very deeply personal ways. And this really does these types of situations highlight the best and the worst in folks, and we're seeing exactly that, right? And my farmers markets are a microcosm of our society, and this is just the latest example of it, right? We've seen wonderful examples of people in market settings doing great work to support their neighbors and support their communities, and then people who don't really understand what is at the core of the market with this perspective. So I think we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions now. Looks like we got about 15 minutes or so. Rachel, were you compiling? Yeah.
I'm following along. If you've been following along too and you would like to moderate the questions, you are more than welcome. But if you'd like my assistance, I'm here for that too, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, if you've got the questions compiled, I have to admit I was struggling a bit to keep up with all the comments. Y'all are a lively bunch, which is fun. But
There
I
is
missed
a
some.
lot. Yeah, and I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. We're at 12:44 and we've got what, until 1 o'clock, right? So we'll work through until either we run out of time or we run out of questions. How's that? All right.
And can I just follow up?
Oh, absolutely, Colleen.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to follow up one comment to Catt's, and that is within farmers markets, a lot of the smaller organizations, those organizations really, those market managers really need the board's support. And they need to know that that board is working with them and supporting them and their ally in this. And sometimes I think a lot of market managers are trying to battle exactly what's been described on their own. And that's where associations are helpful, these conferences are helpful, but also having that internal organizational support is, those hard conversations is just a really important piece to surviving this.
Yeah.
This is Kathy Zeman from Minnesota. I have a question for Ben.
Go for it, Catt.
All right, you got the floor.
Ben, here's what I think we need. We need an analyst to be kind of grab what we're doing right now, and then in 18 months, look back and figure out what did go well, what we're hanging on to, right? So, because this is going to repeat. I mean, I'm right with you, Catt. I'm 62. So I think before, we both hit the grave, we may end up with one more pandemic or one more thing, right? It would be nice to gather this kind of data just to see, like, did 92% of us all go online? And then in 18 months, 91% of us all went back to just in person, that kind of stuff. Like, what really did work? And that's my question.
The question was, will FMC do that?
Yeah, pretty much.
I had a feeling that was what the question was going to be. And, while I can't commit 100% to that, it's definitely something that's on our minds as well. And we're doing our level best to keep up with compiling as much as we can right now. And we'll continue to do that. And the idea of a retrospective kind of thing is something that we have thought about and we are talking about. The extent to which we're able to do it depends obviously on our resources, but given the resources that are being thrown at this, to your point about using these resources both to get through the short term and to build for the long term, brilliant idea. And I think we're looking at ways to try and do exactly that.
Good. Thank you.
That's great. Another couple questions. We did have a couple people ask questions about sourcing and who's responsible for providing the protective equipment, PPE it's often called, at farmers markets. Does anyone want to address that question?
Our county just declared yesterday that as of midnight, anybody that's working in the grocery business is required to wear a mask. Since we have based our whole campaign to get reopened on the fact that we're a grocery store and not a gathering or an event, we're going to have every market have masks. So where in less than 48 hours do you get masks for all those farmers and people? And incredibly, we have a group of customers that popped up and have been sewing frantically for a day and a half now that will have masks made for us.
Wow.
But where you get them otherwise, I don't know right now. And they're being very specific that we shouldn't be wearing medical level masks because they don't want to take those out of circulation for the nurses that can't get them.
Right. I can add to that. In Alaska here, we do have a very active and productive group called Alaska Mask Makers, and you can have a sidebar conversation, but we have a very active group, everyone, if that's something you're pursuing.
Well.
Let's see. Brad, did you have a couple questions posted that I'm not seeing now?
Oh, that was what they were, of where we're finding gloves and if farmers are the ones that are being responsible to provide the mask or the gloves, or if not providing those things.
Great. Excellent. And I'm bopping back and forth between a Word document I have with the questions because it bounces around as people add. Let's see. Who else do we have?
Oh, Liz, I have a question. So in addition to the PPE and all that good stuff, what about hand washing stations? And have are there any good sources for those for markets? Even post hand sanitizers?
Right. Is anyone involved on the markets up here? Have any input on that?
This is Robbie, Homer Farmers Market. We actually own a foot pump hand washing station. The other thing that we're looking at, should markets be able to move forward, is requiring that every single vendor brings their own water and soap station to have in their booth. We also have been scouring the internet for latex gloves, just ordered a bunch off of Amazon. It may take a month to get here. Also ordered a bunch of instant hand sanitizers. So I would advise that every single market and vendor here starts looking for that stuff. But Kyra made a great comment that as soon as we can get the state to officially declare markets essential, we will have a lot better chance and access to those materials. So
Kathy from Minnesota. So in 2014, we passed a safe food sampling law at farmers markets, and it was attached to the food code. So a $25 5-gallon thermos that is insulated, because we have to make sure our water stays warm, just because it's tied to this one arcane food code. And then we swap out the push spigot and we put in the flip up one, because you have to have running water. If you keep that, and of course, in Minnesota, this is all related to our law, but our water had to be delivered at 35 PSI. So if you keep that water 2 inches above the spigot, you flip it up, you wash with soap. I tried to get goat milk soap into the law. That did not go well either, along with my purple hoop skirts. But so that you could do that, because you can run the water, you have to have a pail. But that whole setup only costs like $65. So with soap, paper towels, the pail to grab the water, and the thermos, $65. And that we do make, anybody who does food sampling at our markets, they have to have that in their stall. So it's not.
I want to give, oh, sorry, Kathy.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
I wanted to give Lorinda Lotka. She is with our Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, Food Safety, and Sanitation. And I know that she has some updates. Lorinda, do you have mic capabilities right now, if I put you on the spot?
Sure. I've just been going back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you great.
So I've just been going back and forth through my program manager, Kimberly Stryker, and we received information that Robbie's presenting now from the incident commander. And you can see that there's also a CC from Commissioner Crum, who the Lieutenant Governor referred to earlier, that farmers markets are considered critical infrastructure. And we are also working, so I'm with the Department of Environmental Conservation, the State Food Safety and Sanitation Program. We're working on a website with the Farmers Market Association that will post the best practices and guidance. And we're just waiting. We have to run everything through the incident command right now, any communications on this. So we're just waiting for approval of our language before we can make that website live. So I hope that you'll find that helpful. And once it's posted, we'd appreciate any type of feedback that you would like, information that you would like to see there that you would find helpful.
Thanks, Lorinda. We feel so fortunate to have all of this expertise here with us today. Thanks for sharing that. Hot off the presses, y'all.
Well, I appreciate everybody pushing it, and I'm sorry it didn't come to our attention a little bit earlier in the week so that everybody could feel more comfortable about what's happening in the future. Things can change though, just so you know.
We had a good reminder too, going back to the hand washing station, that if you do install a hand washing station, you need to also have a plan for gray water disposal. Also a good thing. And there, if you look at CDC guidance with respect to risk of COVID-19 in wastewater, it can persist for quite a while. But we don't have any hard science, haven't run the research studies yet to give us any more detail than that, but it does need to be disposed of safely. Another question that we have not gotten to in great detail from someone is, does anyone have any ideas on how to inform our customers about our rules and mitigation efforts? Do any of our presenters want to address that?
We're doing emails that are very, very detailed. We're doing really long social media posts on, you can look at Facebook for Little Italy Mercado or Facebook for San Diego Markets and see that we're doing really long posts about what we're asking of them. We're doing signage that'll be at the door of the farmer's market. We've got a metered entry for tomorrow. But anyway, really long Facebook posts. We're doing some that are cute and clever, and we're doing some that are just lots of rules, and we're trying to keep it funny and light, and we love you. Please shop and go home. Get the hell out. We're telling people they have to distance, and we're really staying, and I'm sorry when I look away every once in a while, it's because we've got tons of questions coming up on those. Well, what if I'm, you know, a mother with 2 small children and I can't come by myself and I've crossed the international date line, and then what happens? It's so we're having to answer lots and lots of questions on social media, but repeating the same, and it's kind of like market rules, really clear expectations, really consistent enforcement. We're trying to answer over and over the same exact thing. It's never an off-the-cuff answer. It's, this is what you need to do. This is what we need you to do. We need you to help us be able to keep bringing you fresh food. So we're, like we do with promotion, we're using every possible avenue. We were on TV, and we've had, and it's a trick right now because we're trying to keep the crowds down. Again, so counterintuitive. Keep the crowds down, but get a lot of information out so that the people that do show up are educated. But all kinds of social media, every Instagram account possible. The vendors are posting for us, which is good.
Thank you, Catt. And I got a text from Robbie behind the scenes. We are going to wrap up our question session now, but a reminder, if you hadn't heard this before, if you've logged in since we last updated folks, all of these chat questions and answers will be documented and shared along with presentations. So if the presenter, if you see a question in there and you want to type in an answer, you do that. We'll make sure we have answers to all of these questions provided as well.
And also,
oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Jody Anderson made a great point that tomorrow from 4 to 6, we're having our big brainstorming session, which is our all call for ideas. And so if you guys are thinking about things after the fact, while we're recording all this now, like tomorrow, I think is going to be the big outcome where there's going to be some more data brought to the table. So just keep thinking, but know that we're going to record it all. But tomorrow.
Yeah, and if any of our awesome statewide leaders here on this panel want to join us again tomorrow, it'll be 4:15 Alaska time. So, Kathy, I think that's 7:15, and for our West Coast people, it's 5:15. No pressure, but
okay, Sarah. Now we know what direction.
yes, you guys are welcome anytime. And I want to just everyone give these guys an airwave because they have been invaluable for helping us see Alaska's way forward in this. And Ben, thank you so much for moderating this and being a national leader for all of us. Yay, Ben. Yay, Kathy. Yay, Colleen.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks to all of our presenters. This is, you know, I'll just reiterate, this is this is as tough as it gets. I mean, this is, no joke. This is the hardest thing that our field, at least in the time that I've been in it, has experienced. Each individual, we may have had our more challenge, but as a field, there's nothing like it. So, you all are doing the critical work. You all are out there making sure that your people get what they need. And so I know it can be hard day in and day out, but thank you. We're going to keep fighting for you at the federal level, and glad to have you all on the ground there in Alaska.
Thank you, Ben. And I, just as a reminder, I've been compiling all of these resources. I've linked them in the chat box. They're also on our website, alaskafarmersmarket.org. There's a COVID-19 response center, and I believe that we have every single person on this panel linked there. So lots of resources for folks. And as soon as we get more clarification from DEC, as Lorinda mentioned, we will make sure we get that out to everyone as well.